We currently, in our ecosystem, we've seen a lot of money going towards entrepreneurs and ESOs, but we're still having the same conversation around sustainability. So how does your organization, when you want to support any organization in terms of ESOs, go about assessing the needs of that particular ecosystem?
Thank you, Josiah. And here I would want to widen it beyond ESOs, because again, you have entrepreneurs as well, which we do support. But mainly the ESOs we support are the hub network across the country. Currently we have over 125 of them. But the way we look at it is we see ourselves as a government agency trying to plug the gap where someone wants to start a business or start the entrepreneurial journey, and the traditional lending sources are not available to them. They're not available to them because they deem them as high risk. So the banks will ask for all manner of things. I was glad when Anaya talked about now they're looking at even mobile money accounts as a means of proving your inflows and outflows. So we're using a lot of global north definitions to describe the environment, whereas our environment is peculiar and we have our own set of challenges. So our job at NEIP is to say, well, how can I help you build the necessary structures? It may simply be you need some licensing from a regulatory body, or you may need support in accessing a certain certification, but to help you build structures that makes you more attractive for the big boys to come in and say, look, I can bet on you, or you are a bankable project or entrepreneur. So we provide funding, and also the BDS or Business Development Services also help people interested in, and I are talking about when applications, some of the applications are not even worth reading them, because sometimes you have very good entrepreneurs, but they can't put the thoughts together well, and it is someone's job to help them do that. It doesn't mean that they are not worth banking on. It just means that they need support in a different way to make sure that someone will look at them. Sustainability here, we have to be innovative, because, and I was happy when Access Pension talked about them now coming in, because the typical traditional sources of funding or lending isn't working. So we have to look at different sources. You and I worked in the ecosystem and we realized that some of our ESOs or entrepreneurs, sometimes they need something as low as 100,000 Ghana cedis. But then you have someone who says, unless you can do $1 million, I would not invest in you. This is a challenge. But for them, that 100,000 Ghana cedis is their $1 million. And when they get access to that sort of funding, it would help them scale beyond a certain point. Now we need different sources of funding that are sustainable, in the sense that from the initial stage, they move them on to the growth stage, to the maturity stage. So funds like pension funds coming in now will help unlock certain things. Sometimes people want to go on retirement. They have a stash of money that they want to put into businesses. But how do we unlock these pots of money sitting around in people's accounts, which startups or entrepreneurs badly need, but are not coming through the traditional lending sources? And for me, that is where the building blocks all come together. And I think the key word today here is collaboration. And how do we collaborate to make this value chain more sustainable for entrepreneurs? Yeah.
Thank you, David. And that will lead me to ask Owusu, being an entrepreneur, amongst the panelists, what other innovative funding sources do you think needs to be set up for businesses and entrepreneurs?
So I'll tell a quick story. February 2021, I received a call from a customer at 9:20 p.m. And what I've learned in my career is that if you receive a call from a customer at 9-something, is either great news or it's terrible news. And she asked me a question after the pleasantries: can you do me a favor? We need you to be at the airport tarmac to pick up the first COVID-19 vaccines for Ghana. Now, that led to a lot of publicity that we were not expecting. We were profiled in the New York Times and other international press and local press. Remember, this was 2021. So you can imagine that as a young company, we also received a lot of contact from investment companies and even angel investors asking us, are you raising capital? Are you raising capital? Are you raising capital? I can tell you that, honestly, about 75% of those individual entities do not have capital now to deploy. So we're very much at the bottom of the cycle, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, we count ourselves lucky because as of January, we acquired a lead investor. So what are the other sources of funding? One interesting trend we see is the fact that investors, big and small, in Ghana have lost faith. Obviously, in the banks, the banking crisis is very much fresh in people's minds, but also government bills. We all know what happened with the government bills. What companies like Grow For Me have done is very interesting. There are a lot of startups looking at that model where they are offering the average Ghanaian, whether they want to invest 10 Ghana cedis or 100 Ghana cedis or 1,000 Ghana cedis, the opportunity to invest these amounts and then get a return, which obviously is not guaranteed, but is delivered through partnership with MTN in their case. And very recently, some of you would have seen that Farmerline also issued some form of corporate bond with all sorts of caveats around risk. The other thing I'll mention is actually the deal room. We have been participating in the Impact Investing Ghana deal room, and it's been incredibly helpful. Entrepreneurs are good at running their businesses. Raising funds is another job, and it requires another competence. So having an ESO back you in that way and provide a pipeline of potential investors is also incredibly helpful. So those are the two, I'd say, top of mind, is working with these types of institutions who are also interested in finding bankable deals, but also going straight to the public and using technology to close the gap.
Okay, so thank you for that. That would then kind of lead me to asking either Gifty or Amma this question. When it comes to flexible and inclusive funding, right, particularly for female or women-led enterprises, because we need them to be sustainable as well. What is your view on that? How do we go about doing that? What mechanisms should we use for that?
You haven't been fair. You should have directed the question. But thank you very much. As Hajia did ask the question, I want to take it from there. Having flexi funding for women enterprises is very critical because the dynamics are quite complex when you compare to other business models. And she did talk about a population, the rural woman. That's the unique population, irrespective of the sectors they find themselves. But even within that spectrum, there are also disparities in terms of the sectors these women are working. Now, to be able to deploy funding to these people, to be able to utilize and achieve the outcomes we are looking for, they must have capacity strengthening. But these are situations where capacity related to enterprise supporting is done in a manner that these women do not fully benefit because language is a barrier and sometimes also the location. So to be able to have flexi funding for these people would be classifying or building location alliances of specific businesses, whether by industry or also by the value chain. And then you can deploy training, which is enterprise support and specific capacity building that are tailored towards their needs to be able to get them to access the funding. And by so doing, I'm sure within the process, you would have also documented specific expectations and needs that would be able to give them the capacity to consume whatever funding you are deploying.
Okay, thank you. And I want to come to Oben. When it comes to, oh, you want to, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in there. And Hajia, thanks for your question earlier. You know, we had a meeting with DBG's CEO last week at the 3i Summit. Anita Solomon is here from DBG. And the conversation around how we plug the gap. I mean, there are rural women paying 40% interest rates on commercial loans from rural banks. Wow. That's where we are at, 40%. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Just want it to sink in for a little bit. So that's where we are. We complain about 25%, we complain about 30%, but I know for facts there are people paying that level of interest on a loan, which is totally unsustainable, it's exclusionary, it's not going to work for anybody. But it's great to see some action happening on the ground to tackle that problem by targeting some of the rural banks and on lending to them as, you know, as the development bank to the rural banks, which also need capacity internally. So I think we need more of those internal, organizational, financial, institutional capacity building efforts to really deepen and get capacity up from those who are lending on to women who are basically excluded from the financial system or exploited, right? So I think these are some of the things we need to look at more critically. We've done quite a bit of work at Scale Up Africa with GIZ to build the capacity of cooperatives, informal sector associations, women's groups, and membership-based organizations, right? Like to build their own capacity in terms of being better organized, their governance structures, even their business models. Like how do they actually raise revenue internally to support their millions of members? So these, again, are efforts that I think we need, grant funding to support because they're pretty loss-making. So if you don't have the DFIs and grant makers coming in to fund that kind of work, it's early, but it's needed to really build the pipeline along the chain, especially when it comes to agribusiness, value addition, and manufacturing, which is a huge opportunity for women to also plug into the financial system.
Okay, thank you for the addition to that. I want to come to Obin. When it comes to sustainability, sharing of resources is something that ESOs or businesses in our sector should really focus on. When you look at MasterCard, one of your core mandates or value system is the co-creation. How are you using that as one of the mechanisms for sustainability?
That's a very good question. So before I dive into that, I would like to touch on something briefly on the innovative financing mechanisms. And that goes back to the question Nadia asked earlier, which was a very good question on how we are, the rural community, the rural women are part of what we do. So at the foundation, with the innovation portfolio, we currently have a program which is called the Young Africa Innovate. It is in partnership with the UNDP. And the thinking here is there are a lot of people within the local communities, the rural communities, who have challenges accessing funds. There are some who are very good, they are very innovative, but they can't even write English, they can't speak well, they can't even navigate the development space. How do we assist these people to be able to, get grants to scale up their businesses? So as part of this program, what we've done is we've introduced something we call the Solution Scouts that are going to the various rural communities trying to help people who can't even speak fluently, who can't even write a proposal, to let us know what they have in mind and what we can support them with. So that's something we are doing to support the rural communities. And it's like 80% women with 100% rural communities involvement. To your question on co-creation, so what the foundation does, for those of you who've worked with us, what we do is we come up with the problem statement. Now, based on that, we try to identify partners we can work with. Now, doing this, what we are mindful of is we may know the problem, but we may not be the experts when it comes to the solutions. So we bring partners together, just try to look at a unified view of impact. What exactly can we do to resolve this challenge? Now, as we do this, we learn from the partners, they also learn from us. And an interesting thing is when we try to do this, we've noticed time and time again that no one organization have all the solutions. So what we end up doing is we partner with several organizations that have some solutions to help resolve the challenge, whether it being as a sub-partner or in a consortium approach. So now the way we work within the foundation is doing co-creation. We try to identify organizations that can complement each other, and then we put them into a consortium, and that helps us address solutions or challenges much more holistically. So one thing we've noticed is if you do have partners who are focused or driven by impact, it's much easier for you to attain the results you want. I'll give you a typical example. When you look at a program like ALX, which is a foundation-funded program, just over the years, since 2020, ALX has been able to reach over 549,000 youth, and out of which they've been able to transition 49,000 into jobs. Now, what this means is they share our view of impact, we learn from them, and based on what we learned, we're able to design a holistic program that addresses the challenges we are facing on the continent. And thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And my next question is to Mohammed, because when you hear about inclusive investment and the point that Amma made about 40% interest rate on loans, what is Impact Investment Ghana doing with policymakers and other organizations to design a framework that is fair? It's almost sharkish when you hear such situations. So what are your organization doing to work with policymakers to ensure that this thing doesn't happen?
Thank you very much for that question. And there are multiple fronts, and one of them I'll speak because we also focus on ESOs, how we are going about it to help ESOs reposition businesses in being investor ready. That what it also means is that they can access facilities at more cheaper rates because they have the structures. The reason why some of these things are happening is because they do not even have systems in place. And what it also means is that financial institutions take advantage and give you rates that would also help protect their risks attached to giving you such monies. So for us, one of the key things is addressing quality issues around the improvement of business services that goes to businesses from ESOs. So we are working with NEIP here. We're working across 9 regions in the country, and we are implementing the Scale Quality Improvement Program. What that is supposed to do is help the ESOs specialize and provide tailored services that would help them prepare businesses to be investor ready and to also have all the required resources or documentation and structures that financial institutions require from them. What it does is once you are going to the institution, you are able to also make a case to even negotiate based on what you are presenting to them. Unlike the typical traditional processes where they can come to you, most of the time microfinance, you just come to the community, bring the women together and give you the loan, require you to pay in. By the next week, you start paying, making your first installment, when you haven't even started using the money to make any returns. So this is supposed to help, and we are working with ESOs across even burden ecosystems. In Dambai, in the Oto region, we are working with Third Hub, which is somewhere in the western region. Upper East, Upper West Savannah region, we have ESOs that we are working with to improve their qualities, and the expectation is that this would help change this particular dynamic. From the national level, we are also working with the Pensions Industry Collaborative, and the conversation is around how to unlock pension funding to support investment into the local ecosystem, especially the private sector. What it does is it reduces the risk level in terms of what cash flow comes into the ecosystem, and thus can also trickle down to help reduce some of these challenges that we are facing.
Thank you, Mohammed. So my next question is to Amma. Until recently, ESOs are kind of were left to fend for themselves, right? So we were jumping from one program to the other until our godfathers, NEIP, funded us last year. Now you work on the ESO pool funding. Is it possible to give us an insight on what it is that you're trying to achieve, how you're trying to support ESOs in that respect, please?
Thanks, Josiah. So you and I both sit on the steering committee for Impact Investing's Entrepreneurship Support Collaborative, and we've been spending time designing a pooled fund, which is really in 2 distinct parts. So there's, part A is really to do with really pre-seed, early stage requirements of the SMEs themselves, which is we're looking around a $10 million facility. And then the second part is really around the ESOs themselves, their own capacity and their own investment in training, salaries, hiring the best people for the job. That's always a challenge. Helping entrepreneurs themselves access better quality service delivery from ESOs. So this is really embedded in deep research that we've done at Impact Investing Ghana over many years. We've had various stakeholder groups and fora. Some of you have attended some of our our annual ESO forums across the years, and it's grown from strength to strength, as we've seen. And so, yeah, based on the research on what we need, we've always been very strong at advocating for ourselves at Impact Investing Ghana as an industry body. Our ears are very close to the ground in terms of our membership base, from the funds, from the intermediaries to the entrepreneurs themselves. And so we have a very clear idea of what it is we really need to get to the root cause of our quality issues, which Mohammed just mentioned, and also the funding and capacity building issues for ourselves as service providers to the entrepreneurs themselves. So I think we need to just really look forward to the launch at the end of this year, hopefully. There will be some roundtable discussions with various to open up the conversation with stakeholders to really critique the design that we've drafted. We have a consultant, Hamdia should be here somewhere, but we've appointed a consultant to help us to really drive into the technicalities of the fund, and hopefully, we can launch it at the end of the year and see some success around how we provide for ourselves as ESOs, and also the service provision for the really pre-seed, almost proof of concept requirements of the SMEs themselves. So it gives us that kind of a control, and we can see how that goes. And the target is to support, I think it's 500 SMEs with that fund, $16.5 million. So yeah. Anyone funding?
I think you can give a round of applause to that one. It's a lot of work. Now, Gifty, you, for your organization, worked with you in the past, particularly with Crossroads, where you embed experts into other organizations to help them where they have deficits and stuff. We are now talking about impact and sustainability, but that's a skill set. It's a huge skill set that organizations in Ghana, particularly entrepreneurs or ESOs, can't afford to have. How do you think we can kind of cross or get over that bridge when it comes to getting that kind of skill set in our ecosystem?
Thank you very much. So talent acquisition in terms of the ESO work and also startups is very critical, and that is the area we have worked, because we realize that funding is limited, and if you are starting and you have to add talent acquisition as a startup, then it further dwindles your opportunities to stabilize. So one key component to leverage that is having these strategic partnerships, where you can work with a civil society organization or an NGO that has opportunities to partner with you and can leverage that asset. So organizations that have talent, that have skill set to support your organization can serve as volunteers, and that would be a savings you'll be making from that point, because you would not be paying services for that, because the organization would provide that. The other piece is also looking at working in partnership with that organization around priorities that align. So if you have an organization that you are, say, testing an app that is a technological infrastructure, and you have an organization that is also looking for an application to do something, you could leverage with them and partner on that, because you would, for them, be running an advert for them, but at the same time, you would have been proving your model at the same time. And because they already have funding to run, let's say, an communication component on that, they would be funding you, but you are proving your model. So those are critical partnerships that startups would need to leverage on to be able to grow. There are also the other piece where you have to look at industry level pre-competitive alliances. We are talking about collaboration, and it's also important to look at cooperation as well, because sometimes people feel in competition more in the space than cooperation, but where you are partnering with people from a point of cooperation, then you can also leverage also from that space, because you are able to understand the priorities and also the expectations and the converging points as well, and that would also help ESOs to be able to scale up the models. So from a partnership perspective, I think these are key pieces that we can leverage.
Are we still good with time? Okay, moderator's not here. Okay, kidnapped him, that's cool. So Owusu, as the entrepreneur here, what are some of the barriers that you face when it comes to raising funds? So again, in an ideal world, you could just walk to Obin's office on Monday and then say, you know what, I need, $1 million for a project. Only just one, just, so that, Obin doesn't lose his hair like I've lost mine. So basically, what are some of the barriers for you in that respect as an entrepreneur?
So the first thing is around debt, right? I mean, I think that some of the activity that entrepreneurs in Ghana raise equity for, in other places, people use debt. And the dilution for the entrepreneur also has consequences on the longevity of the business and how much they feel invested and so on. So it's great to hear earlier on today, some of these initiatives to get the interest rates down. Those are very limited and targeted initiatives. So how do we get to a point where we realize Ama's dream of single-digit interest rates for a long period of time? So that's one challenge. The other challenge, some of the foundations who we have had conversations with, there are two approaches. One approach is to say, hey, you are too small. This ticket size is too small. We only invest through intermediaries, and good luck. And we've had many of those conversations. And the other approach is, okay, we would love to invest in you, but the economics doesn't work. Tap into this intermediary who we fund, and we're going to hold hands to matchmake. So the challenge is obviously the first approach, right? Where the mandate of the organization is to help organizations like us. Sometimes we'll read the criteria and it's like, this is us. They're describing us, but the translation doesn't translate into action. And is a frustration also because as an entrepreneur, your rarest commodity is time. Nobody wants to spend time, even 10 one-hour conversations in a week can make a big impact on progress for the month.
And thank you for that. So I just wanted to ask Obin, technology is a huge platform for us, your organization to use in terms of engaging its potential partners and stuff. Whereas we have impact investment, the deal rooms that they make. Is this something that MasterCard would, the MasterCard Foundation would look into doing, using that platform to engage its potential partners in that respect?
Yeah, definitely. So technology plays a critical role in what we do, right? So even when you look at the foundation itself, we are always exploring innovative tech solutions. Now, when you look at the programmings we have, currently I think we do have several programs that try to address the issues of technology gap. When I spoke earlier, I spoke about the 3 areas we look at in the digital technology when it comes to the foundation, which is access, proficiency, and employability. Now, when it comes to the access part, where we know in Ghana, internet is quite limited. We can move out of Accra and Kumasi and probably the western region. There are a lot of areas that are challenged with internet. So the foundation has actually taken it upon themselves in some of our programs where we provide access to devices and even 1-year connectivity. When it comes to employability, we also know that there are some businesses that will need some technologies to thrive. So in some of our programs, like we have a program with IDH where we are working with AgriCenter to maximize access to market using technology for rural farmers. We are also having a program with PLENARY that seems to enable access to finance through technology. So the foundation is always open to looking at innovative technology solutions to support ESOs and other entrepreneurs. So that's something we are really interested in. Yeah. Okay.
So thank you, Obin. The next question to David. NEIP, it's very hard to kind of describe NEIP, right? because you fund entrepreneurs, then you're also on the side of government. So you just kind of, and also now fund ESOs. So you're almost like godfather of funding at the moment, but you're not a bank. From your point of view, what are some of how do you leverage on the kind of mixture of possible funding that is there, that entrepreneurs can reach out, and then ESOs can reach out, and then also other organizations can also reach out to NEIP? Because I don't want a situation where come Monday, everybody will be queuing outside your door, so to speak.
Right. I like the scenario Kojo gave earlier, even though Oasis asked that he probably hold on that, which is the ideal Ghana want to see in 10 years. At NEIP, we get frustrated with some of the barriers that my brother spoke about in his entrepreneurial journey. When you go and knock the door and you get all the definitions from the global north being used against you, because that is the description, and he who has the money calls the shots. So they say they want this, and that's what you have to do. We work closely on the ground. We see entrepreneurs day in, day out. We go to the field. My job really is not an office-based job. Go to the field, you see what people are doing, and you know that this thing would sell globally. But sometimes you're constricted from where you sit, even as a government institution, because whatever funding we get, you equally still have the man with a big stick saying that you can't do this much, you can't go this way, you can't go that way. We don't drum that too much because we're there to fix problems, so we don't talk about that much. When we decided to support ESOs, which is the hubs, it was because of what we know the hubs go through. Your ecosystem is as strong as the ecosystem support institutions. If you have startups who are strong, it's because the startup support institutions are stronger. So we saw that a startup goes to a hub and they don't even have basic chairs or access to co-working spaces. It's a challenge. And these are community-based hubs who play a critical role that government can't reach in that sense. And Ghana is bigger than Accra. So you go to Dambai and you see a startup with solid idea, you run through with them, you quiz their mind, and you know this thing will work. You know this thing can scale. But they can't get the necessary support. So we have to make sure that now we come in and support the hubs and make sure that they have that stability over the period. And it's all part of sustainability, because how do the hubs remain sustainable going forward? When it comes to giving funding, we don't want to pride ourselves to say that we give funds directly to startups all across the country, because you can't simply do that. It's not sustainable. But what we do is a case-by-case basis, and that's why we have designed programs. So we have the presidential pitch sessions, which it has some tagline to go with it, but essentially it's to put money into businesses to try and de-risk them, to make sure that, look, this thing, and these days, we give that example, and it's a practical example, because people see Pizza Man, Chicken Man, for instance, challenging the other eateries, because he had such a platform, not only the funding, but also the exposure from NEIP to say that, look, what you have, the model you have will work. And today, that's what we see out there. There are a lot more of them that even have products on the shop shelves of our big shopping chains that have benefited from NEIP support, to say that, look, this is a bankable project. The banks will not look at you because you don't have that collateral or that, but government can take the risk on you. On government, it's a grant, it's not a loan. We say, look, you are a Ghanaian, we want to push this. Because what we want to see is a lot more of our innovators or our entrepreneurs having their ideas or their products or services in the sub-region, on the continent. That way, the real Ghanaian dream is seen. When we do that, it makes them clean enough for the banks to now say, okay, we have a mixed funding that we can give you smaller interest rate. Or it makes sense for maybe the venture capitalists to say, look, now we are at a stage where we think that we can bank on you. By the initial stage, what we see as bankable, they may not want to touch you. But we will say, still take a risk on you and push that. And that's really sometimes the frustration we get. We don't also have the free hand, because you are still dealing with taxpayers' money. And you have to be accountable to the taxpayer. So you don't want to come to the taxpayer and say, I invested in 100 businesses and 90 have folded up. They'll say, hang on a minute. No, that's not our money well spent. But the Ghanaian have to understand that the space we are playing in now, if we have to raise the champions and the job creators that we need, a lot more have to fail. It is something we've got to accept. Our tolerance for failure is very, very short. And that's why we're having all these conversations. But the world we're trying to push at, before you had one Snapchat or one Google, 100 more have failed. And it's the reality. And so what is the tolerance we are prepared to accept as a people, that we have to push a lot more job creators, but a lot more will fail before we get to the point. I'll give you a case study. A recent trip to Denmark, and one of the things that we saw was that when Nokia failed in Finland, it spiraled a whole new generation of successful entrepreneurs from the Nokia failure. So if we don't prepare to have that level of failure, then we shouldn't be looking for the success stories that we are looking for.
Yeah, thank you, David. So now to the audience and the entrepreneurs in the room. For the first time, as an entrepreneur, the route to funding is kind of laid out clearly for you to see. The amazing work that Impact Investment Ghana is doing with the deal rooms. You have access to organizations that will fund you privately. Then you got the likes of NEIP. Then for the first time, you have ESOs that actually now have resources to support you. So then my question is, why are you finding it difficult to raise funds? So with that said, we are open to your questions. Don't be shy. We don't bite, so you're free to ask questions.
Please, we don't have time, so if you want to ask a question, do it faster.
Thanks. So what's the institutional appetite for early stage investments? Because right now it's NEIP that has put its hands up to help with investments. But when it comes to the angel portfolio, we had a conversation during the break that there are people here who've put their own personal money into small businesses, but they need additional money to be able to reach a scale such as FreezeLink. What's the appetite from an institutional point of view, not myself and other people in the room, because that is what will really move the needle. Thank you.
Okay. Amma, you want to take that? Or is it David question?
Thank you. Yeah. I think the appetite is quite low. When you see in other jurisdictions where, private individuals are prepared to handhold, throw money at you, give you all of that, we don't see that much in Ghana. It's a cultural thing. I think that even when you're going to school, you're told that this is all we have, we push you through school, don't go and bring any problem, don't go and bring any trouble. So that mindset constricts us, so we don't innovate. And I think in the West Africa region, if we compare ourselves to our brothers in Nigeria, they are more verbose, they go all out. In Ghana, we try to be constricted. We want to play small. So even when people can even give you the little, they're still hiding it and say, I'm not quite sure. We like to see that, let others start, and then when it becomes a spectacle, then they come in. And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs in the room will say, when I got to a point, now everybody is trying to get my business card and all of that. So the appetite is quite low. If you look at, we don't have many, even when you're looking for mentorship, people are not prepared to come out to mentor young entrepreneurs. We have a lot of success stories, but they're not prepared to share them. And we see a lot of businesses. If you look at businesses like Casapreco, that started, and how now it's one of the beverage giants. You need that wide appetite from within, because when we are looking at the global north and we are looking at people coming from external, they're only coming to support what we are doing ourselves. And until we raise that appetite ourselves as a people to say, look, I'm prepared to throw it all in, including the kitchen sink, then unfortunately, we're not breaking the ceiling the way we want to see. At NEIP, we say, look, yes, the taxpayer will come after my neck because they'll say, give accountability. You hear all sort of stories and political gimmicks, but we see what we see in young budding entrepreneurs, and we see that this thing will work. And even if it doesn't work, hey, at least we tried. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just add something quickly to what Dave is saying?
Okay.
And to Mirabel's question, there are a lot of bad ideas and bad businesses in the system. Unfortunately, survival, just trying to make $1 in a day to feed your family. I mean, we have a lot of those businesses. But in terms of understanding how you're going to get to scale, you need to understand that your customer is going to be your biggest investor at any given time. If you can show revenue, cash flow, it gets easier and easier to convince an external investor to put some money in. Whether you're an angel investment network or an individual angel investor, you need to recognize that as a business, you're going to have to learn how to grow your customer base and revenue base as a first step. We did quite a bit of research a couple of years ago with the Africa Business Angel Network that showed that, like the Casa Precorns of this world, the companies that have done well over time have just really grafted and shown that they have a product that people want and pay for on a regular basis, and they grow their market. So it's not really about external investment all the time. It's just about Kojo's lurking around the corner. Yeah. Okay, that's me done.
Okay, so we'll give 30 seconds, and then we'll give Mohammed 30 seconds.
Just to answer the question she asked, I know David has touched on the risk appetite, but I just want to share that we have a couple of programs in the foundation that support startups with grants for them to, and that has high risk appetite. So we have one with GEA called the ESO program, which I believe it gives grants to startup. And we have one with UNDP, the one I mentioned earlier, that gives various grants to various stages of the startup. So they support you, they link you to market, and they help you to scale. So these are programs that you can reach out to support you. Thanks.
So I'll top it up and say that from the Impact Investing Ghana space and the ESO collaborated specifically with Amma and Josiah on the steering committee for the ESO Pooled Fund, the appetite has been very low, and one of the innovations we are coming up with the ESO Pooled Fund, which has a $10 million component, which is meant to catalyze investment into this space. Like Mr. David said, no one is interested in that space and no one is ready to put any money into that space. And we are taking it upon ourselves to work with stakeholders in the ecosystem to support us to drive income money into that space, to help unlock more resources into the space. In other markets, once you have an idea and you're at early stage, it's easy for you to get access to resources to move things. In our case, it's very risky, and no one is, even businesses that have been existing are finding difficult to be able to unlock this resource. And we believe that the ESO Pooled Fund is one of the game changers that would help us to change this situation. And we do call on everyone to come out and support us. We'll be having a roundtable around the ESO Pooled Fund. That's in next 2 weeks with Andy here, who is co-convening with us. We'll also like everyone to give us a round of applause, specifically to the steering committee members and Andy for making this happen and getting us to this particular point. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. And I would like to say, Amma, we really appreciate your dedication to getting this funding into our ecosystem, and it's exciting to see everything that you're doing, and keep pushing, and we will support you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for the moderator and the panelists.